This is Charter California Edition. I'm Brad Pomerance. I'm glad you're with us. Over this half hour, we'll be speaking with Bill Lockyer. Mr. Lockyer is the treasurer of the state of California, and he is the dean of the legislature, or the Sacramento Capitol, whatever you want to call it. He has been in Sacramento longer than any sitting member of the legislature or the executive branch. Some would say that's a challenge, some would say that's a plus. We'll talk about that. And over this half hour, we'll talk about various issues facing the treasurer, be it bonds, be it spending in our state. We'll also talk about some initiatives that are likely to be before the voters in November of 2012. Treasurer, thank you so much for joining us on California Edition.
Thank you.
Before we get into the lofty issues of the day, I want to talk about you and how you came to be such an icon in the Capitol, if I may say. Where did you grow up?
Oakland, California.
Okay, and wonderful childhood of the 50s, I presume.
Yep.
Where'd you go to college?
Berkeley.
Okay.
Mostly.
And
then later on in life,
yes.
Actually while I was in the state assembly, I went at night to law school at the UOP campus in Sacramento. UOP has McGeorge School of Law.
Of course, I used to be a lawyer, so I know.
I went there at night for years and years.
And it became very important for you to do that because, as we'll talk about, you were the Attorney General of this great state.
Right.
But let's back up even further.
Okay.
You graduate from Berkeley, the political bug has bitten you, and you become a staffer to a sitting assembly member. Tell us about it.
Actually, the bug happened in 6th grade.
Of course it did.
So early hobby, volunteer, and so on. So I worked for a local state assemblyman, that area that's East Bay, San Leandro, Alameda, Oakland. And in 1973...
But before we get there, you were an elected official before you became a member of the assembly.
Oh,
Is
that's
that right?
correct. Yeah. So I had served 2 terms on the San Leandro School Board. I was the youngest school board member in the country. I don't know how anyone would know that.
Okay, well,
anyhow,
be that as it may.
Whatever.
But in 1973, an incredibly sad and shocking event occurred that changed your life. Tell us about what happened to the sitting assembly member that you were.
My boss, Assemblyman Bob Crown, who served during the kind of Unruh, Pat Brown era
Which
up here.
were really pivotal times.
Great times.
When it became a full-time legislature, for example.
Yes. So he was jogging in Alameda one late afternoon and hit by a car and killed. So there was a special election, and a variety of us ran, and I was the one that prevailed in 1973. So I served until 73 to 82 in the state assembly. 82 until I ran for Attorney General in 1998 in the state Senate.
But let's talk about your time in the state Senate, because while you were there, you were the pro tem. You were the leader of the state Senate.
Yeah, it always felt great to have temporary in your job title, the pro tem. But,
temporary,
yeah.
right, that's true.
Yeah.
Talk to us about how your time in the Assembly, your time in the Senate, and as the leader of the Senate has informed you as a member of the executive branch today.
Well, it's real different. But, you know, in the legislature, mostly you get paid to have an opinion. Hopefully they're based in some experience and analysis and thoughtfulness, but basically you register your values by voting hundreds of times a year. And so it's different than management responsibilities. Now, they have opinions about management. Sometimes they do oversight of executive agencies to critique a program or understand how it works and budget it, that sort of thing. But it's really different to manage maybe a dozen staff members and become Attorney General, where you have 1,100 lawyers plus a lot of other people. So it's different in that sense.
So in 1998, term limits forced you from office.
Yes.
And many of your colleagues decided that they would end their time in Sacramento. You did not.
Right.
You decided to run for Attorney General.
Correct.
It's very different running statewide, over 30 million Californians back then, than running in a state Senate district, which probably back then had, what, 800,000 people?
Yes.
So talk to me about that first statewide run. That was quite a different ball of wax.
Well, it was probably a good year for a Democrat, which helped me.
Yes.
But my Republican opponent was the chief deputy for the prior Republican Attorney General,
Was that-
Dan Lundgren,
Yes. Was that
who's now a congressman.
was that Pashigian? Was that who was your opponent?
No, David Sterling.
David Sterling. Okay. Yes.
He had been a legislator
Yes,
before
okay.
and a judge, and he was the chief deputy.
Right.
So he had kind of cachet as
Yes,
the
he
guy
did.
who was there, the insider, and so on. So it was a tough campaign. I had a primary fight. He did too, but so we went through that. And I was the nominee, and mostly talked about we need a new type of attorney general that tries to help prevent crime, who's involved in consumer affairs and environmental matters, not just the narrowest sort of law enforcement
And
work.
what's interesting about your victory and recent victories by Democrats running for Attorney General is, as a general proposition, the Attorney General's office to many feels Republican. You know, the insurance commissioner.
Law and order.
Yeah, insurance commissioner feels Democratic. Yet, oftentimes, Californians have not done that. We've had Republican insurance commissioners, Democratic attorney generals. How have you been able, how have successive attorney generals been able to kind of still, you know, wear that mantle of law and order, Democratic attorney general?
Well, I think the point is, despite whatever the sort of optics might
Right.
be, Democrats want to fight crime as much as Republicans, and maybe have a more comprehensive perspective on how to do it well. And so voters, or at least some of them, think that that's a good thing to enforce environmental laws and other
And
things.
it's worked. Okay, so in 2006, you ran for treasurer. And that's a very different position than attorney general.
Correct.
What made you decide to make that move?
Well, I'm interested in state government.
Clearly.
And that's what I do. And
Clearly.
you know, periodically people say, "Oh, come to our law firm or whatever and make money." And
Yeah, and you could.
And I just say, "That's
not
not
your
me.
thing."
That's not what I do." So I looked at what was possible. There had been a maybe a candidate for governor somewhere along the way here.
You've heard that?
But I thought it was imprudent if there was Arnold Schwarzenegger to fight with, or Jerry Brown, there's people that I either couldn't beat or were my friends.
Right.
And so I looked for what would be smart and fun and interesting work. Treasurer. Now, it's
yes.
the banker.
It is.
And it turns out the world of finance is so interesting. There's a reason, first of all, so many of them make a lot of money there. Not me, but they do, because there are a lot of really smart, clever, driven, hardworking people.
Do you feel as if your time as Attorney General has made you a better treasurer?
Well, it helped, because I had to look into and investigate a lot of financial frauds. So
The last 6 years, no doubt.
So as AG, I did that a lot. The first settlement with one of the big mortgage scams was an outfit from Orange County called AmeriQuest.
Right.
I was involved in that analysis, investigation, and so on, and it kind of was the precursor. In fact, people have said to me, you know, when you announced that deal and changed their practices and eventually they basically went out of business, what if anyone had listened then, prior to all the 2007 downturn, and said, yeah, these are good rules, we ought to impose them on the financial industry?
How would you compare the two offices, personally, professionally?
Well, the work you do is different, in the sense that you're running a law firm, you're running a law enforcement group, rather than a bank. So I
Very
have
different.
now like $9 billion a day that comes
Just $9 billion.
through our shop,
Right.
and goes out in various ways or gets redirected to other segments of government or whatever. I'm in the markets, financing, construction of schools, etc.
Personally?
Well, it's I've always had a really good staff. A lot of the ones have been with me since I was in the state legislature. So they are nimble about fitting into the new responsibilities and do it well. But for me, it's a wonderful way to learn new things, to see new things, keep your sort of skills fresh.
Treasurer, when we come back, I want to talk to you about that $9 billion circulating through. Talk about spending in the state of California. Sure. He's Bill Lockyer, Treasurer of California. I'm Brad Pomerance. We'll be right back on Charter California Edition.
Which sitting member of the United States Congress has served on behalf of California the longest? Jerry Lewis, George Miller, Pete Stark, or Henry Waxman? Congressman Stark began his service in the United States Congress the same year that now Treasurer Bill Lockyer began his service in the California Assembly.
Welcome back to Charter California Edition. I'm Brad Pomerance. Glad you're still with us. Our guest is Bill Lockyer. He is Treasurer of the State of California. He has been in Sacramento since 1973 as an Assembly member, as a Senator, as Attorney General, and now Treasurer. He is also rumored to be running for Controller of the State of California in 2014. We can talk about that at another time, but I want to talk to you about what may be mythology, and I want to get a sense from you. Okay. I think there is a notion that California state government employs a huge number of people, that California state government is bloated, and that we need to be cutting the number of employees in order to get a handle on our increasing budget deficit. Mm-hmm. What do you know about the size of government in California?
Well, what we can probably do that makes sense is compare us to other states, okay, or compare us to the past to see how do we look, you know. So you learn things like we've got the same size of state government as we did when Ronald Reagan was governor 40 years ago.
Clearly.
And so the state grew, population grew, but the size of government didn't. But if you compare to other states, what you find is you rank the states per thousand, right, how many employees? Yeah. We're fifth from the bottom. So 45 states, a lot of those red states that are conservative places, employ more people, that is, have a larger state government than we do. That's true of local government as well, compared us to other states.
So why is it that there is this mythology? If the numbers are what you say, and I presume they are, I have read the same studies you have. These are nonpartisan studies, Center for Continuing Study of California Economy. What is it? I mean...
Yeah, well, arguably, every state is too large. So I guess somebody could believe that, and then it wouldn't matter what state you're in, including California. Candidates, some particularly, find that this resonates with some voters that want limited small government, that want lower taxes, that a way to say that is, well, we have this big bloated bureaucracy. And no one bothers to refute it. Why would you spend money that way rather than saying, well, gee, I'm a good guy and I can manage it well, or whatever your message might be?
Well, what about on spending? Because it's also axiomatic that California overspends. I mean, that is what we hear time and time again, even though we do know that we are spending significantly less just because of budget deficits than we were 5 years ago.
Right.
That being said, it's just to suggest that we are underspending is pure blasphemy.
Well, and you're right, and there's a fashionable group now that likes to say, well, gee, we have a spending problem, not a revenue problem. Well, I'm the banker, so I like to look at the numbers. So here's the numbers. Jerry Brown's current budget contemplates spending $5.14 of every $100 of state personal income. So $5.14. Ronald Reagan, now we're talking about the conservative, $6.02. So spending basically one seventh more than current Brown spends.
But this is the problem, is if this story is true, and I'm presuming it is, the numbers speak for themselves, the way California government is operating suggests that it's operating at a deficit. And I mean, metaphorically, not financially. That this story is really impacting how we govern a state which is the 9th largest economy, the largest state in the union. I mean, if this story is true, we have some real problems, sir.
Well, it certainly means, compared to every Republican governor, Duke Majan, Pete Wilson, Schwarzenegger, Ronald Reagan, all of them were spending more than Jerry Brown is now trying to spend in his budgets. And so it, I think, raises in a legitimate way, have we made an adequate commitment to public education, to investing in infrastructure, and so on?
Is the problem that the story is not being told because of us in the media, that we're not telling the story, Or is the problem that elected officials are not telling that story? Or is the problem that those that are for the notion that we are spending too much, they're just telling the story very well?
Well, I think it's more the latter than anything else. And what people want to hear, you know, no one likes to pay more taxes, or very few people do. Maybe Warren Buffett and a few others.
Yes.
But, okay, but mostly if you say, well, I'm for lower taxes, you know, people like that idea. Now, when you look at polls, it's interesting because they want the services. It's just the wish list for what I want is a lot longer than the I'm willing to pay for it list.
And we're going to be talking about where California voters are on taxes in our upcoming segment. But I want to also talk about another potential...
Let me mention another problem, Brad. It's this. We used to kind of say, well, gee, I'll believe it when I see it, and it's morphed into I'll see it when I believe it. So something happens where people get information that just reinforces their pre-existing opinions.
I got to digress. I was reading a story from the University of Michigan. It was a study that was put out by that institution, and it said that if you present an individual with a set of facts that disabuses them of a set of facts that they believe, even if their underlying facts are wrong, and you are able to present facts that we know are right, what happens is they become more entrenched in the facts that are wrong. So it becomes human nature. And this is left or right.
Yeah.
I want to talk about another issue that may be mythological, and that is the issue of pensions and how public employees are paid. I think it's fair to say that 20 years ago there was a notion that public employees were paid less in the private sector, and therefore we should give them better benefits, pensions, health care. Now, there is a mythology, I don't know if it's mythical or not, that public employees are making the same as the private sector. And since the private sector doesn't provide pensions, we shouldn't either, or we should have pension reform. What's your sense?
Well, when you compare the types of public employees, I mean, we have engineers and school teachers and janitors, or you name it.
All.
Okay. So what you find basically in public service is those that had more education tend to be paid less than in the private sector. Toward the lower skilled blue collar jobs in the public sector, they may be compensated more because they have health care, for example. And in the private sector, they don't have health care.
So are you concerned that if we do engage in a bona fide pension reform that results in fewer benefits, if we engage in bona fide health care reform, that results in fewer benefits, that the state, the public sector will see a brain drain? Because if they're already making less than the private sector, the more educated, and then their benefits are going to be cut, why would they stick around?
Well, there are people that are committed to public service, and they just feel like that's my calling. Even, you know, there's a limit, obviously, and maybe you'll lose some at the university professors or something, but mostly they like that type of work.
So do we need, you're on CalPERS, you're on CalSTRS, the two major pension systems in our state. Do we need pension reform?
Yes.
We do.
And there's a couple of flavors, but they aren't the radical ones that try to do what happened in the private sector. In the private sector, we're creating a cadre of impoverished old people that are going to retire with nothing but Social Security.
As you may know, Senator Kevin De Leon is considering a bill that would provide some type of formula whereby if you do not have access to private retirement, you can buy into a
he's trying to address that problem. Now, on the public side, on their pension systems, what we know, first of all, is the typical CalPERS, state or local government employee, right now, the median is in the mid-25,000s.
As a retirement benefit.
That's what they take home. They're taking home less than $3,000 a month.
When we come back, sir, actually, can we talk more about pensions?
Sure.
It's a very important issue. It goes right to the heart of our state budget. And then we'll talk about some initiatives that may be on the ballot, probably on the ballot in November. Okay? His name is Bill Lockyer. He's treasurer of the state of California. I'm Brad Pomerance. We'll be right back on Charter California Edition.
Who served as a member of the California legislature the longest? Willie Brown, Ralph Dills, Bill Lockyer, or Jack O'Connell? Ralph Dills served in the California legislature for 38 years. He served in the Assembly for 10 years from 1938 to 1948. He served in the Senate for 36 years from 1966 to 1994.
Welcome back to Charter California Edition. I'm Brad Pomerance. Glad you're with us. We're speaking with Bill Lockyer, Treasurer of the State of California. We're talking about pensions, public pensions, and we'll be speaking about the initiatives likely to be on the ballot come November 2012. The Governor Brown, called the current pension system a Ponzi scheme. Do you think the current public pension system is a Ponzi scheme?
No more than Social Security or anything else that tries to guarantee some adequate retirement for people after they've worked their lifetime. And so, you know, what he's saying is, well, you need new people coming into it to finance that. Well, yes, but maybe this is something you miss when you don't have kids. There are new generations behind us.
Kids, I hear you. He's also proposed something that is quite dramatic, especially for a Democrat. Mm-hmm. He has proposed that we will still have traditional guaranteed pensions, mm-hmm. but he's offering a 401k style savings plan for public employees. Mm-hmm. That's quite dramatic for a Democrat.
Well, there's that discussion generally that goes on. Now, we know as a matter of analytics that 401ks don't produce as well. They don't generate the same income. They generally have more expense load than the traditional publicly run PERS type pension. But having a mixture of the two in some way makes sense.
So why is it that 401k style savings plans become the nirvana for those that are seeking pension reform if, like you said, I mean, the Brookings Institute, I mean, they come out and say 401ks make less than public pensions.
Yeah, well, I think two things. One is their perspective reflects Wall Street needs. They want to run all that money, not have PERS do it. They make money when they run the pension system. Secondly, because it's the private sector model, there's some that think, well, whatever's done in the private sector must be right. Let's do that.
I want to talk about the initiatives.
There's a third thing.
Oh, go.
There's some that are just anti-public employee, and it doesn't matter whether it's salaries or jobs or pensions or whatever, that are just anti.
Okay, let's shift gears, if we may, sir, and talk about the initiatives that are likely to be on the ballot come November. We know at least one will be on the ballot, and that is the initiative of Governor Brown, which would increase sales tax by 0.5 cent for 5 years, increase taxes on the wealthiest for a term. We've been speaking about spending. Do you think we need to take more revenue in the form of this tax initiative?
Well, yes. There is a spending problem. That is, we're not spending enough on vital programs.
One could argue.
Like education and health care and some other vital things. So the governor, in order to balance the future budgets and not make additional cuts in public schools and the university system and state college system, is saying we need to have these temporary taxes. I think whether it's that or the other proposals, we got to pass something.
Well, let's talk about the other proposals, because those other proposals, one by a teachers organization, one by a woman named Molly Munger, I think it's fair to say they take a similar approach, a kind of left-of-center approach, but it's also fair to say that if all three on the ballot, it's likely voters will get confused and vote them all down. You are a leader in Sacramento. Are there efforts for those three groups to get together to try to eliminate the circular firing squad?
Well, first of all, I'm not yet convinced that voters can't discriminate among them and make the right choice, or make a choice that they think is the best. So I'm not concerned about kind of the optics and the tactics and so on. My concern is we need tax reform in California. We tax just goods, not services. The rates get high and so on.
And let's talk about that, because there have been proposals floated that we tax services. For example, the services of accountants or lawyers or doctors. It seems like those proposals get some steam and then they peter out.
Well, no one likes the idea of imposing a new tax. So partly it's that whoever would be taxed opposes it and fights against it.
Well, what about lowering the sales tax overall, but have it apply to more products?
Well, that's persuasive to me. You know, we're now largely a service economy, not just a manufacturing economy. So it makes sense to spread the burden wider. Now, you have to be sensitive about the fact that some of those services might migrate to a state that doesn't tax them.
Right.
So, although a lot of states now do tax services,
what about...
we have to be careful, but bring the rate down. You're right. Spread it more broadly to be fair. I think that's good.
As you know, your friends in the Republican Party they consistently point to Texas. They don't do that in Texas, so we shouldn't do it.
Actually, they do tax some services.
And that's what I was going to ask you.
Yeah.
So you believe that there could be some bipartisan support then for a proposal like that?
No.
No.
Not likely. Well, maybe. But, I mean, if net outcome is a tax lowering in aggregate, theoretically it could be bipartisan.
But could it be passed by a majority?
No.
No.
It takes a 2/3 vote.
Still.
So you're either getting Republicans and Democrats to agree, or, and that's hard, even if it's a net decrease, the fact that somebody paid a new tax is usually enough. Or you do it by initiative, and that's the kind of discussion that's not this year, but probably some future year.
So let's talk about initiatives. Californians traditionally have been generous when it comes to initiatives. They've passed several bond measures, be it related to transportation, high-speed rail, education.
Mostly they spend money.
As we discussed. But it hasn't been since 2004 that Californians have passed a statewide tax increase, which is what one of these initiatives would do. And in 2009, they voted down a statewide tax increase. 2004, good times. 2009, not quite as good. An unpopular governor. What do you think is the mood of the voters come November in terms of a statewide tax increase?
Well, I think they're always initially skeptical about tax increases, kind of would wish to vote no, but can be persuaded that there's a need. So you have to say, here's the need, we're going to spend it well and not waste money on things that are frivolous or lower priority. And that's kind of what at least all of these are trying to say. Let's mostly spend it on education because we know that's the top priority for government spending programs.
At the same time, we may or may not have a water bond on the ballot. It was already postponed. I spoke with Senator Rubio recently. He thinks it will be postponed again.
I agree with that.
But don't we need this water bond? I mean, you're the banker, you're the treasurer. Don't we need this water bond desperately? That's what
I think it's postponable. Now, there's a lot of unmet needs, whether they're education or highways and levees and water programs, housing. The list goes on, larger than we're ever going to be able to finance. So we need to prioritize and be disciplined and focused. And I think probably the water bond got too large because of the politics, and scaling it down, even if it means delaying it, is okay to do.
What about the politics of having both an initiative that increased taxes and a water bond on the ballot? I mean, is that really what we're seeing here? Is the politics are that we need the revenue more than we need to have the water bond today?
I suppose that's part of the thought. Mine is really, we can postpone the bond discussion temporarily, and maybe there even would be higher priorities like education finance ahead of water, but they're both important.
In our final moments, you're rumored to be a candidate for controller in 2014. Why do you want to do that?
Well, this is what I do, and of course it's still the finances of the state, which I've gotten expert in, and serving on the pension boards and so on. So we'll see. That's kind of my proclivity.
And what's going to happen to the current controller?
Well, John Chung has expressed interest in running for my current job as state treasurer. Now, we're close friends. We're a good team. We're on PERS and STIRS together, and I guess we'd continue.
And that's what we get with term limits in the final analysis.
Well, we do that.
Okay. His name is Bill Lockyer, so I want to thank you so much for joining us on California Edition. He is the treasurer of the state of California. My name is Brad Pomerance. I want to thank you so much for watching Charter California Edition. Please stay tuned for more public affairs programming on Charter Channel 101 and the California Channel.